There it is. Grace and peace this evening to all the brothers and sisters of Israel and all the Gentiles around the world that are in Christ, and brothers and sisters that are learning and coming into Christ. Grace and peace. I'm Brother Lahab. This evening we're going into a subject that's important to all of us. It has to do with the family of the nation of Israel and also the families of the world. And this is concerning the conditions and situations that men and women find themselves in today, and especially the Israelites, and why this has happened. But before we go into that, we want to talk about God said that he was jealous over the nation of Israel. And what does that mean? That God said he was jealous of the nation of Israel. Because what we have to do, we have to put things back in its proper perspective concerning the Israelites, and to understand the conditions that the Israelites find themselves in at this day and time, in captivity, outside of their kingdom, and in the Gentiles' kingdom, and what confusion and chaos is caused for the men and women, families and children of the nation of Israel. But God wanted Israel to be assured that we're in the age and time now that he was going to fix this problem. But the key issue that God wanted to establish in Israel and to show them that the nation of Israel had lost the divine nature. And the divine nature comes with a set of divine laws and rules that governs success, that governs love, that governs joy, that governs happiness, that governs peace. So we're going to go and take a look tonight, right, at this knowledge that God gave mankind that would bring him into peace and harmony in his life, no matter where he was in the world. Because Christ said, even after the Israelites were going to be brought down in captivity, Christ said, my peace I give you. And to receive that peace, that the nation of Israel must walk back into the consciousness of the divine nature. Okay? So tonight, we want to just step into this, right, and open this up so we can shed some light on the situation and confusion among the Israelite men and women and children, and among the so-called black man and woman. What is this confusion, and why things are the way they are? So tonight we're going to take a look at that, right? But first of all, we want to go to the book of Deuteronomy. In the book of Deuteronomy, the 7th chapter, and the 6th verse, right? So just let me click that, right? The book of Deuteronomy, the 7th chapter, and the 6th verse. Because it's something that God built Israel in his knowledge. God built the nation of Israel in his knowledge, in his spirit, in his power. He even told Israel, does not the scripture say ye are gods? So now, the gods are frustrated. The princesses and kings of Israel are frustrated, and the women and the children are frustrated in this captivity. But now, God gave the remedy and gave man the understanding of how this imbalance came about. So we want to clear that up, right? And show man that this is all going to be reestablished, but it's going to be reestablished. God told the nation of Israel that they must gain knowledge. Knowledge is power. And knowledge are keys. Knowledge are how you enter into prosperity and power with God. He established that among the Israelites in their very beginning, that his knowledge was their success. So now, God said that he's jealous over the nation of Israel. And a lot of nations are concerned about this. Why is God jealous of the nation of Israel? So let's take a look at it. This is in the book of Deuteronomy, the 7th chapter, the 6th to the 8th verse, right? I'm just going to read this. But thou art a holy people unto the Lord thy God. The Lord thy God has chosen thee to be a special people unto himself above all people that are upon the face of the earth. And the reason that God did this, because God started out with the families of Israel. And God took his power and chose who he wanted to choose to represent him in the universe, to represent him in heaven and in earth. And the Israelites were the people that were chosen, the first fruit that were chosen to represent God. They were the first people that were chosen to receive the Spirit of God, to become God. And so, but how did they lose this consciousness and this knowledge that they were the people that were greater than Egypt, that were greater than Babylon, that were greater than Medo-Persia, that were greater than the Greeks, that were greater than the Romans? How did these people lose this power and this knowledge? And God warned them to not learn or receive the ways of the Gentiles. Because the ways of the Gentiles, according to God, was base consciousness, meaning it was not connected to the divine. Yeah, men had knowledge of the earth and knowledge of this and knowledge of that, but God had set the nation of Israel into the godship of the heavenly order of that world, where they had the facts about everything. They were given that spirit. Solomon was given that. David was given that. The apostles and the prophets were given those spirits and that knowledge to the exactness and the science of God. It was done in Israel, in the nation of Israel, not in Egypt, not in Babylon, okay? So I just want to say this right. So our people are bent to go to Africa and to search Africa, but Africa is not the key to your life. God is the key to the life of the children of Israel, those 12 tribes. And his knowledge is the key to your life, not the Gentiles. He warned us about the Gentile knowledge. The Egyptians are on the ground in Africa, which was once a great kingdom. They lost their power because they used the wrong science, and God destroyed them for that. Just like every other nation. Just like the nation of Israel. We used the wrong knowledge, and God destroyed us because God is only dealing with his divine knowledge. So now, but let's read this right, because a lot of people ask the question, well, why is God jealous of the nation of Israel? Okay, let's read this again. For thou art a holy people unto the Lord thy God. The Lord thy God has chosen thee to be a special people. A special people. Isn't that something? Unto himself, above all people that are upon the face of the earth. Not Egypt, not Babylon, not Medo-Persia, not the Greeks, not the Romans, but the nation of Israel. And during the time of David and Solomon, we walked in his power and in his authority. And all the nations came up unto Israel in the days of Solomon to learn the wisdom and knowledge of Solomon. Solomon, the scriptures say that the princes of Zoan were fools, meaning the princes of Egypt. They did not have the knowledge that Solomon had. Solomon had the knowledge of all science, the universe, the heavens, the zodiacs, the animals. He talked to animals. He had all this knowledge, spiritual knowledge. And other spiritual men that have such knowledge and such power was done in Israel, because Israel was given the divine power and the divine knowledge of God that made them such a people. But now the nation is frustrated because of the captivity. We're going to take a look at that. And because of the divine status that they have lost. But now God sent Christ to show them how to be reestablished in the divine order again. In the divine order is prosperity, spiritual power, wisdom, knowledge, science, creation, government, justice, wisdom. See? Because God is dealing with knowledge. Okay, now, so let's read on, right? The Lord did not set his love upon thee, nor choose you, because you were more in number than any people. For you were the fewest of all people. The nation of Israel was the fewest of all people upon the earth in their day, in their creation. And when they became a nation, they were the few of all people. They were not the greatest. They didn't have the greatest number of people. They did not have the greatest armies. But the Israelite armies, they had the smallest armies that took down the greatest nations. Because what God did in the nation of Israel, He gave them the power of the gods. And a lot of you brothers and sisters that understand this knew that God gave David the 37 mighty men. God gave David an army that was invincible. David went to his grave undefeated because of this power of God that was given him. They were mighty of the mighty. There was never an army raised up like David's army after David. Okay, now, not among the Gentiles, not among any nation. You got the white man talk about the Navy SEALs. The Navy SEALs was no match for the army that God established in David, because David them had spiritual power in the army. See, a whole different type of army, because the nation of Israel was dealing with the forces directly out of the divine order of heaven, which is a whole nother level of power. So let's read on, right? But because the Lord loved you, and because He would keep the oath which He has sworn unto your fathers. Those oaths were sworn to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God said He chose Israel because He loved them. So now if God loves us, and now that is supposed to build our confidence, that is supposed to make us seek God, that is supposed to make us want to be reestablished in God's divine order and His divine knowledge. If God said He loved us, no matter what nations say or what people say about the nation of Israel, is what God said about you. See, that's where it's at, because man's words is meaningless. It's what God said that makes and establishes you as a people, Israel. It's not what your enemy said, it's what God said. So we're to stand on what God said, on His word, what God said about us. We were made to be made in the image of God. And this is something that we must be restored back into, because in this matrix world that we're in, a lot of our people are caught up in the matrix world, in the matrix feelings, and in the matrix sports, and in the matrix idea, and this matrix is totally corrupt. This matrix is the corruption of the spirit, mind, food, material, clothing, fabric, air, everything that pertains to the success and life of mankind is corrupted in the science of this matrix under the rulership of Esau and these Gentile nations. God, that's why God said He would destroy them that destroyed the earth, because they have polluted now the divine order that God established on this earth. So now, but let's read on, right? Because we want to clear this up tonight concerning the children of Israel. Because the Lord loved you, and because He would keep His oath which He had sworn unto your father. The Lord brought you out with a mighty hand and redeemed you out of the house of bondage, from the land of Pharaoh, from the king of Egypt. So God brought Israel out of Egypt because He loved them, and God established Israel because He loved them. God said He was jealous over Israel because He loved them. So, in other words, there's righteous jealousy. God's jealousy is a godly, righteous jealousy, because He chose Israel to manifest Himself and His image on this earth. So we're going to take a look at that. But now, before we finish that, I just want to read the situations that, since the nation of Israel has lost the divine order that they were created in, and the conflicts that they have now, we just want to read that, right? So everybody can understand what's happening with the Israelite man and the Israelite children, and the Israelite man and his woman, the black man and the so-called black woman. What is going on, right? Man and woman were first traumatized by what has happened to them in their life. And the captivity has traumatized a lot of people, and evil rulership of mankind to the point that people and nations have chosen to solve their problems, their issues through human methods. And so now, men have been traumatized by the disorder and confusion of the distorted image of man. This matrix has brought man into a distorted image of himself, even to the transgender, even to trying to feminize mankind, trying to feminize the Israelites, trying to make the man feminine and the woman masculine. And this is a great conflict, because the spiritual wickedness in high places is rejoicing to see the corruption of the nation of Israel and mankind. Because the satanic powers are out to destroy what God created, like we've showed you in our other programs, that the satanic powers are out to destroy mankind. That's why the scripture says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but spiritual wickedness in high places, to make man destroy himself, destroy his family, destroy his women, destroy his children, destroy his life. So now, to lose his prosperity, to lose his nation that God gave him to rule, to lose all of it. And so, from the beginning of the history of this world, even before the flood, the people before the flood lost their inheritance because they did not understand the warfare that was against them in the spiritual world, of the satanic powers that want to destroy what God created. But God said he gave man wisdom that would defeat these powers if man would live in wisdom. Because the divine nature is a power, is a force that is connected to the spiritual world, the heavenly world, that's connected to God in Christ. And if man had lived in that, man could have avoided the flood that destroyed the world. If man had lived in that, man could have avoided the judgments of this world and the captivity of this world. So the nation of Israel left the divine nature. They were created to be a divine people. And that is what God is accepting. That is what he's creating, that's what he's producing in the nation of Israel, among the men and women and children of Israel, first the Jews, that divine nature. This is what the Israelite man and women must come face to face with. The confusion in their lives and troubles in their lives is about this divine nature, the divine order. Okay? Is the nation of Israel, are the men and women of Israel outside of the divine order? That is the question. If you see conflict and confusion, then that's the sign that we're outside of the divine order. Because the divine order brings peace, it brings love, it brings joy, it brings prosperity, it brings happiness. So let's take a look at this, right? But God has determined now to restore mankind, the Israelites, back into the divine order, which is their success. Okay, so we all have to gain the knowledge of God and be restored into the divine knowledge of God that Christ came to teach. Christ was a teacher to restore the Israelites back into the divine order. So let's read on, right? Now, mankind is trying to solve his problems, his issues through human methods. Men have been traumatized by the disorder and confusion of the distorted image of man. twisted out of shape, giving misleading and false information and false images. The Israelite male was blessed before he was born. They were going to see the status of the Israelite male. God said, before I formed you in the belly, I knew thee. And he also showed in Christ that the Israelites were established in God before the world ever began. So the Israelites did not have no trouble until they came into this world, until they left off the divine order of God. That's when their troubles began. So now Christ came to reestablish back into the divine order. So now let's take a look at this, right? The Israelite male was blessed before he was born. He was made in the image of God from the beginning. He is the Prince of God. To be men of justice, righteousness, government. He was created to be a lover of God and creation. He was created to manifest God on earth. He was created to be divine. And we're going to go into the divine and show that that is the truth. Okay? What is the divine? Divine represents the excellency of God's judgment, the excellency of God's spirit, the excellency of God's science, of God's wisdom. The Israelite men were created for that. And if we're not operating in that, is why it has to do with our great frustrations upon this earth and in this captivity. Because we're going to show you, God created the Israelite man to be a man of action, a man of building, a man of creation, a man of government, a man of judgment, a man of statue in the earth. Through the wisdom of God is what would give the Israelite man his statue in the earth. So let's read on. He was created to be a lover of God and God's creation. He was created to manifest God on earth. He was created to be divine. He was created to possess the powers of God and the wisdom to use the power of God for the benefit of mankind, to rule and to correct mankind. That's why the scriptures tell you in the ancient records that the nation of Israel was supposed to teach the Gentiles the righteous laws of God. Like we said in many times, that did happen in the day of Solomon. Solomon taught the Gentiles the righteous laws of God. Okay, now, so let's read on a little more of this, right? Now, we spoke about the men, right? Now we want to speak about the women of the nation of Israel. And all women for that matter. Okay? The women of Israel were created to be made in the image of God, and to be the glory of the Israelite man. To be spiritual, meaning to let God's glory dwell in her, which is the spirit of the princess, the spirit of love, the spirit and love of her God, the spirit and love of her nation, the spirit and love of her people and of her men. This is part of the divine order. If this order is broken, then it creates confusion, it creates chaos, it creates anxiety, it creates depression. So now, a lot of people are talking about what the Israelite males and females are going through in captivity. And the real answer about this is because they're not in the divine order. Abraham and Sarah were in the divine order. And we're going to take a look at that. Abraham and Sarah enjoyed life and were rich and powerful and received the blessings of God because they were in the divine order. How were they in the divine order? They kept the commandments of God. They kept the wisdom and teachings of God. They kept the divine order in their life. Abraham and Sarah never had an argument. They never had a fight. The scripture says that Abraham sported with Sarah, meaning he hanged out and partied with her, sported to hang out and enjoy her, and they enjoyed their life. They were wealthy and they were powerful. Abraham had his conflict on earth concerning Lot among the Gentiles that rose up to take and offend Abraham's relative, Lot, and Abraham rose up with 318 of his trained men of his own household and took down 5 kingdoms. He gained fame for that, he gained honor for that, and he gained respect for that from the heathen nations, that they showed that they could not take this cat down. They could not take Abraham down because Abraham was backed by God. And the reason Abraham was backed by God, because Abraham was in the divine order with God. And the Israelite men, we were created to be in the divine order of God. No, we were not created to be effeminate. No, we were created to be men. We were created to be masculine, not effeminate. Okay, the femininity is for the female. Okay, and a lot of people have lost the understanding of the masculine, male and female energy. The masculine and masculine energy of a man and the feminine energy of a woman is supposed to complement them in that glory. But without that knowledge, without the divine knowledge of these things, it's still confusion and chaos, still arguments, still conflicts going on in relationship with men and women, and that's in all nations. Because of the divine order has been lost on this earth. That is a conflict among nations, among people, among teenagers, among men and women. The loss of the divine nature. Did the colleges and universities of America teach the divine nature? Did the University of Europe, did the University of Africa teach the divine nature of God? We're not talking about false gods. We're talking about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That divine nature, okay, is when you are plugged in now to the spiritual power and the Spirit of God. And this was given first to the nation of Israel. They were plugged into God at one time because they were given the divine nature. They maintained it under David and Solomon. After Solomon's kingdom was over, the nation of Israel went into decline. Meaning they walked away from the divine nature. Okay, now, so let's read on, right? Let me read this again, right? So the conflict, Israel and the Gentiles around the world and you Israelites around the world, is over the divine nature, the divine order. There's a divine order to man. If he's lost that divine order, then he's lost part of his spiritual, mental, and psychological state. There's a divine nature to a woman. If she's lost that order, she's lost part of her mental, spiritual, and psychological state. Okay? And what the results of that is the loss of peace, joy, happiness, prosperity. But we're going to show tonight that God is determined to reestablish the nation of Israel into that divine order and into that prosperity for them, for their women, and their children. And God is determined to show the Israelite men and women what love is. what it is to be a beautiful man of wisdom and knowledge and excellency, what it is to be a beautiful woman of virtue and beauty and righteousness, and how these two spirits bring you into the glory of paradise. And that is a very high calling, because the matrix world that we're in is in base consciousness. You cannot get paradise here. You cannot get paradise by using the knowledge of this world. You cannot get paradise through sports, through money, through the riches of this world. Paradise is a spiritual and mental and psychological exaltation in the spiritual world, in the divine order of God. So now, let's continue to read on, right? The woman of Israel were created to be made in the image of God. This is something that the Israelite man must continue to learn, that he was made to be in the image of God. He was made to be in that divine order. The Israelite woman was made to be in that divine order. If she's out of that order, it's conflict, confusion. The Israelite male was made to be in that divine order. If he's out of that order, he's in conflict and confusion. Christ came to reestablish us back in that order, and out of conflict and out of confusion. But how many people of the nation of Israel, God have overcome the world, meaning have overcome this matrix idea, have overcome the pride of life, the envy and jealousy of this life that this matrix put out, okay, that have you challenging and clashing with each other and ego tripping with each other. That's what this corrupt matrix has done. In God's creation, in God's divine order and His divine nature, there's none of that. There is no jealousy. There is no ego tripping. You are. You are that you are. You are the glory and power of God. And I want to say this right. All the Israelite men, before you were ever born, all of you have an inheritance with God. Every last one of you that bears the name of the 12 tribes of Israel, you have an inheritance with God. If you could look back into the heavens and see what it is and what it was, then that would give you great peace and great comfort. You Israelite women, you were predestinated in the glory of God, and God has already established your future for you. If you could look back into the heavenly world and see what's in it for you, you would be at peace with yourself. But this matrix has stirred up the emotions of mankind, because Satan knew that this would happen. That if he set forth all these different sports and lifestyles and Hollywood and scientific and technology, what it would do to the mind of mankind. And what it has done is